Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. And if you're new here, welcome for the first time. It's great to have you here. And today we're going to give some dark fantasy recommendations that horror lovers should enjoy. Stay tuned. Okay everyone, so there's loads of different kinds of fantasy. It's almost the same as horror. I mean, it's just so many different categories. There's high fantasy, low fantasy, there's urban fantasy, there's paranormal fantasy, there's grimdark, and loads of others. But for the sake of this video, when I say dark fantasy, let's just say that we're talking about fantasy that is dark. In other words, fantasy that has horror elements to it. And in some of the cases that I've got here, some of these books are considered horror by some, but in my mind all of them are fantasy with dark elements and horror elements. So yeah. Okay, let's start with some special mentions, all by the same author, an awesome horror author, Clive Barker. And yeah, he's better known for his horror work. The Hellbound Heart, Hellraiser, but he's written so much awesome dark fantasy, and I've mentioned him before a number of times on my channel, so I'm just going to show you the books as a special mention. And we have The Great and Secret Show, and look at these covers, they're beautiful. And we've got over here, got Magica. Now this is a big thick tome, but I flew through it. And then we've got one of my favorite books of all time, and that is Mieville. Now the thing about him, he's world building, his imagination, and these characters are so interesting and just unique. Just everything about this writer. I just keep coming back to imagination. Absolutely phenomenal author. So yeah, do yourselves a favor, if you're a horror reader, pick up, first of all, Mieville. That's my favorite. Okay, but the first book is going to be a book by Clive Barker that I haven't spoken about. And that is a YA book called Abat. But don't be fooled. It might be YA, but believe me, it gets pretty dark. Well, it's Clive Barker after all. And yeah, this is about a young girl called Candy Quakenbush, who gets swept away, literally, by a wave into another world. And it's a hell of a lot better than the world she came from. She's staying in a place called Chicken Town, which is boring as hell. And the world she goes to is complete opposite. And it's made up of 12 islands, and each island represents an hour in the day. So you got basically 1 AM to midnight. Now, it's just so fantastical, this world. I've got some pictures up there I'm going to show you, and they're all basically drawn by Clive Barker himself. He's an accomplished artist. He's art on display, and it's just so imaginative and just so out there. And the big thing about this is that at midnight it's ruled by a character called Christopher Carrion, who is a villain in the story, and he's kind of despicable. And yeah, as I said, it gets kind of dark, and it goes there. It goes to the horror places. A lot of criticism has been about the plot. A lot of people criticize the plot because, Candy kind of goes to the island. She gets threatened constantly, and she runs away. And it's more about exploring the island in the first book. And it's a setup because the book is a trilogy. Well, it's actually a trilogy. It's Abat, and then there's another 2 as well. So yeah, absolutely love this book. Love the characters. Freaking weird characters, believe me. He's got... and I love the villain, Christopher Carrion. And yeah, highly recommend this particular book. And check those illustrations. Check those drawings. That is Abat. Okay, and now for something darker, grimier, filthier. And that is King Rat by China Mieville. Now, I read Perdido Street Station early last year, and I did a full review on the book, and it was absolutely brilliant. I didn't enjoy this one quite as much, but because I've done a review on that one, I thought I'd talk about this one. And it's awesome, and it's about a young man named Saul. Oh, and by the way, it's set in London. I'm not going to talk about this too long. A lot of the characters are incredibly weird and creative, and it kind of reminds me of a book called Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. Now, Neil Gaiman would have been on this list, but yeah, he's leaving a bad taste in the mouth at the moment. The allegations against him, so I chose not to include him on this list. But he's got a lot of books that are dark fantasy and beautiful books. But yeah, I'm still thinking about how I feel about this author. But China Mieville, let's get back to that. Okay, it's a young man named Saul, and he's in London, and it's dirty and it's grimy, and he gets imprisoned for a crime he did not commit, and that is the murder of his father. And then he gets basically busted out of prison by a creature, a shadowy figure called King Rat. And he learns about this royal heritage and that he has his abilities, and he basically develops his abilities. And I'm not going to say any more. You need to discover for yourself. A lot of people call this urban fantasy. It is, but I'm including it here because it is most definitely fantastical, and it has a lot of horror elements, very dark elements. So that is King Rat. Okay, the next book is not Magician by Raymond Feist. If I sound a little croaky, I think I'm getting a bit of a cold, so excuse that. But yeah, it's also by Raymond Feist, and it's a book called A Fairy Tale. And now believe me, this is not light-hearted high fantasy. High fantasy is not really light-hearted, but this is freaking dark and scary. And it's about a wealthy man. It's a screenwriter, and he moves his family to this farm, and it has these woodlands, and part of the woodlands he owns as part of his property. And it's very important because it's kind of an intersection between the real world, our world, and the world of the supernatural. Because on this part of his property with the woodlands and the forest are fairies, Fairy Hill. Now these fairies are not gentle and beautiful and benign and sweet and loving and grant you wishes. These fairies are freaking cruel and oversexed, like freaking sex maniacs, some of them. So yeah, and the worst of them are beyond that. They're just vicious and evil and terrifying, and yeah, they threaten not just this family, but they threaten humanity as a whole, human race. And so yeah, and this book goes to very dark places, don't be mistaken, and that is Fairy Tale. Okay, the fourth book, and now it's more a series, and I could have chosen a lot of Stephen King books, The Talisman, and I haven't read Fairy Tale yet, but I'm going with The Gunslinger, part 1 of the Dark Tower series, which is probably my favorite series of all time. Well, it is. And now, yeah, it's a blend of fantasy and almost like kind of a Western thing, a Western feel. And it presents the world, and it presents the world that has moved on. It presents a world that is very close to our world, very eerily similar to our world. There's even an old amusement park. It's kind of broken down. Like I say, this world has moved on. But what I loved about it is the characters that are presented, especially the gunslinger. And you introduced to this other character, Jake. And then also you have the man in black. And this book just sets it up, sets the rest of the series up. And I know that there are many people that don't like this book. They find it boring, difficult to get through, kind of a drag, and don't like the fact, I think they don't understand Western, the blend of different genres. And all I can say to you is, if you're stuck on this book, you need to read it and you need to keep going, because book 2 and book 3, it's just almost the story, the world explodes, introduced to other characters, and it really does just get a hell of a lot better for many people. But I actually really enjoyed this. Play it out like an old western movie with fantasy elements and dark elements, and I just love the characters. So yeah, do yourselves a favor, read this, read the whole series. It's freaking awesome. And this is the Gunslinger. And we're going to finish off with one of Stephen King's best friends, and may he rest in peace. And this is Shadowland by Peter Straub. A lot of magic and magicians. Now, actually, I haven't read anything for this video, but I do want to read this blurb from Goodreads. Listen to this. You have been there, if you have ever been afraid. Come back to a dark house deep in the Vermont woods, where two friends are spending a season of horror, apprenticed to a master magician. Learning secrets best left unlearned. Entering a world of incalculable evil, more ancient than death itself, more terrifying and more real. Now, this is a fantastic novel, but I have to say that it's also a very challenging novel in terms of the writing, a very slow burn, but it's also the narration, excuse me. It's kind of a third person narration. You never know who the narrator is, and it's kind of unreliable. So he's kind of looking back what the story could have been. So sometimes you don't know what the hell's going on. And it is a challenging book. But what I love about it is the menace. And just the sense of menace it gives you, and the tension on so many pages. It's slow build. And then the payoff is great if you're patient and you can get through it. So yeah, I highly recommend Shadowland by Peter Straub. Okay everyone, that's my video for today. Have you read any of those books? Do you have some recommendations for me? What did you think of them? Let's start a conversation down in the dark spaces below. Yeah, and I really hope you enjoyed that. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. And until next time, take care of yourselves, keep those pages turning, and cheers.